Welcome here today and thanks for sticking around. I know it's been a long day. So my name's Ben Ralston. I'm a 2014 Nuffield Scholar. My study topic is changing Australia's oyster culture. I was sponsored by the FRDC. Look, I'd like to start by thanking Nuffield Australia and FRDC for giving me the opportunity to travel to 10 different countries around the world. Thanks to all my hosts and my Nuffield group, who have now become long life friends. My partner Tegan, who 2 days into my GFP gave me a phone call letting me know that I was going to be a dad. So that's another tick for Nuffield because I missed out on all the morning sickness. So thank you. So just before I start, I just want to give everyone a snapshot of oyster farming. Look, we've got our history is amazing and the future is very exciting. So these photos here are the way farmers used to grow oysters in the 1980s, all the way through till the 1960s. So what you have here are these rocks. Farmers used to row 10 k's up the river on an incoming tide, hand load these rocks into their boat, and then on the outgoing tide, they'd row back down the river and lay them in lines along the riverbank. It would take 3 years for them to be able to get a harvest off these rocks, and they'd go out there and chip them off the rocks manually. They would load them into a 40 litre Hessian bag and then send them off to processors or wholesalers. In the 1960s was the next big change, where the stick cultivation came into play. So the stick cultivation was more so about less labour intensive than the rock farming, and also higher productivity. And you can see here the oysters they're a little bit ugly. They're different shapes, and to this method today, there's still 40% of farmers in New South Wales still farming this method. And once again, oysters were 3 to 4 years before they got harvested and sent to market in 40 litre Hessian bags. Moving on to 2015. So this top corner here, you can see a photo there. There's 500,000 baby oysters there brought from a hatchery. So the new way of farming is floating infrastructure. So we're using that top 10% of the water where the nutrients and minerals are for the oysters to grow. And by doing this, we're looking at around 2 to 3.5 years before we can actually harvest our oysters now. So it's bringing us back in time. And we're also, about 60% of these oysters will be sent to market in 40 litre Hessian bags, where the other 40% will be sent to either restaurants or consumers in branded boxes. So objectives. I first started, I wanted to have a look at how we can educate restaurant owners and their chefs about buying live oysters. What I realised fairly quickly, that's not the issue. The issue is our oyster culture within Australia. So my objective was understand what an oyster culture is, understanding value in the supply chain, looking at better packaging and presentation for oysters. Changing Australia's oyster culture. Australia's oyster farmers sell live in bulk to processors at the moment. All these oysters will be pre-shucked, rinsed in fresh water and then stored in a cool room. This method is becoming less respected and is a lower margin at the farm gate. When I was in France talking to some of the growers over there, they explained to me the way we sell oysters in Australia is actually against the law for them to do it in France. So this was something maybe we can look at in the future. Learning the art of shucking an oyster is the change that is needed. So it's the consumers such as yourself need to learn this art of shucking an oyster. So this is the missing link in our oyster culture, is having fathers, grandfathers, teaching their kids, grandkids, how to shuck an oyster around a family barbecue, enjoying oysters in their natural juice and creating that environment around oysters. Remodelling the supply chain. Opportunities to add value in the supply chain. So the successful farms I saw throughout the year have split their supply chain in two. Thank you. Have split their supply chain in two. You can be the most successful farmer in the world, though if you don't put any time into selling your product, you can effectively be losing out on a lot of value. So you really need to treat your supply chain as a business now. On farm, one, off farm, two. So you need to turn them strengths into your supply chain into value. For example, on my farm, I can have oysters harvested and delivered direct to restaurant doors within 24 hours. This is a strength in my value, in my supply chain. Now it's being used as a marketing tool to turn it into value. You also need to pinpoint what weaknesses are in your supply chain. So on my farm, for example again, we have no control over the couriers and what temperature our oysters are actually travelling at. So a way around this is by using technology, putting temperature loggers into this box of oysters. And then what we're doing now is turning that weakness into a strength. And then in time we'll turn that strength into value. Improving the way oysters are packed. So this is a really good snapshot of what happens in the world compared to Australia. So this is a French box of oysters. So there's 50 to 100 oysters packed in that box. It's branded, it's got seaweed on top for presentation. The next one is a French box, a timber box, branded lid, presented really well, and once again 50 to 100 oysters in that box. These are both now sitting in fish shop windows where the consumer can see them and buy them like that. Then moving on to Australia. We package in 40 litre bags and we send them direct to market to wholesalers, processors. So if farmers want to help change Australia's oyster culture, we need to start to think about how to package our oysters and how to make that change. So this is probably one of my best findings when I was travelling. What are oyster farmers selling? Is it just oysters? So when I was in the Netherlands, we got a chance to spend some time with a flower guy, a marketing guy in flowers. He explained to me that flowers bring out different emotions, so different colours will bring out different emotions. So if you have a bright flower, it might make somebody's day happy. So flowers equal emotions. I looked at oysters. So oysters actually equal good experiences. 90% of Australian households have some type of oyster experience. Whether it's down at the rocks with their grandfather, picking off oysters and eating them straight out of the water, to the family going on holidays and getting a Hessian sack of oysters from the local farmer. So this is a culture that we really need to build on and start to promote more so. Trends for young farmers throughout the world. This is, once again, in my travels, the more young farmers I met, the more this became apparent. Trends from young farmers around the world are all about trying to come up with new ideas to cut out the middlemen. They are still all small scale, though one stood out for me, and this was in the Netherlands. I met an oyster farmer who's about 30, he was in business with his father. They had a shack for sale for 11 years out the front of their oyster farm. And he talked his dad into buying this, and his dad said, "Son, why do we want this? We're 2 hours away from any major city." And then the son ended up getting his way. He's brought this oyster bar, and in their second year of business, they've had 52,000 customers through that door. They're now selling less oysters and making 3 times the profit. So looking outside the box could sometimes pay off. It's not for everybody, but if the opportunity's there, sometimes it's worth a go. So the French oyster culture is the strongest in the world. They produce 80,000 tonnes of oysters per year. Over 50% of this will be consumed at their Christmas lunch. So they'll be served with brown bread. The French consume more oysters in one day than what Australia produces in 1 year. So the good point about this is they have their oysters at the important lunch meal of the year, which is Christmas with their family. All the oysters are shucked at that table, live, served in their natural juice, which is creating that experience around what oysters have to offer. Adapting to change, changing the way we sell oysters. So in Australia, we are lucky. There is room for both the pre-shucked oyster and the live oyster. At a restaurant in Australia, you'll probably pay around $20 to $30 for a pre-shucked oyster per dozen. And then you compare that with a live oyster, when it's shucked to water, is going to cost you between $40 to $96 per dozen. So you can see there, that's where there's definitely a lot of margin to work on for oyster farmers if they look for going direct to restaurants. So the benefits of this change is one is higher profit for the farmer, creating a brand for demand, consumer getting what they pay for. Meaning if you go to a restaurant and you order a dozen oysters, you know they're being shucked out in the kitchen and they're going to be served the correct way. Consumer having the true flavour of what an oyster is with that natural juice. Creating an oyster culture which is about high quality, good experience, with links to the farmer. So this one is, when I got home and I've travelled the world, I've seen what I've had to see, and now I have to relay this message to our farmers and prove to them that this is a viable option. So this is making it real. I got the opportunity to do a trial at the Sydney fish markets where I branded a box of oysters, as you can see to the right of this photo. We put it on the right of this stand so it was a little bit out of the way. I trained the staff on the oyster, the brand, the flavour. We charged 30% higher than any of the unbranded oysters of the same size. And the results actually surprised me more so than anyone. The results were the 30% margin was accepted and the actual sales were 60% higher than any of the unbranded oysters. So this is the findings to make sure we can prove that it works. Australia's oyster culture. Let's change. Thank you.